Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of the Executive on Thursday, the 13th of July. I would like to just announce the apologies. We have Councillor Kent, who isn't with us this evening, and that's because we have a job share for our executive member for Environment and Climate Emergency between Councillor Revilius and Councillor Kent, and Councillor Revilius is in that capacity this evening. So the first item on our agenda is declarations of interest. Does anybody have any that they need to tell us about? No? No declarations of interest. Thank you, everybody, for that. Our second item is minutes of the meeting that we held on the 15th of June 2023. Does anybody have any comments on the minutes at all? No. So we're in a position to approve those. Can I see that you are in favour of approving those? Right, thank you. Those are approved. Item 3 is public participation, and we have 3 members of the public that want to speak this evening. We have 2 in the room here with us and 1 via Zoom. So we'll start with Peter Richardson, and he wants to speak on matters within the executive's remit. So Mr. Richardson, please come to the table. Is that okay? Do you need a hand? And then perhaps Francis, you can sort out the microphone for Mr. Richardson as well, please. Yes, it is.
Can you extend it to 4 for me, please, to come on?
I don't think so, sir. Everybody gets through. My apologies. Sorry.
In February this year, I spoke at the full council meeting, and I put forward some questions, 2 to be precise, regarding the adult social care precept. Was it going to be £39 or 303? I have had no response from you people. And then there's the other one, the legality of the council tax bills. They are supposed to have post and pre council tax on it for come to discuss and see what's going wrong. Anyhow, the main one is, I'm fed up with you people closing your ears and eyes to the way the adult social care is being operated. It is not cumulative. And the reason for that is quite simple. When you people decide on the council at the budget and what the council tax is going to be, you can, if need be, put another couple of percentages on for the adult social care. And this is done in February. Once you have settled on the council tax and the adult social care, you have 7 days, or one of your people, to notify the government. Therefore, whatever he sends in is what it should be on the council tax bills. Whoever sends the information in has put 2%, 3%, 1.5%, 1.5% to make it in total 16% over the 8 years.
Apologies, you have 30 seconds. Thank you.
Because of the way you have done it, the percentages have gone 5, 6.5, 8, 10, 13, 14 and 16, totaling 72%. That is the amount that you people have taken from the ratepayers, and it's just not acceptable. You can have that and those to look at.
Thank you, sir. And we will look into
Thank you.
those questions and we will get back to you. Thank you.
Well, I hope that you do it in a hurry, because if you've got the press here now and they take into account what I've just said, then your ears will be a bit on the hot side.
Thank you, sir.
Although I have said.
Could you pass them down the table, please, Councillor Eyre? Thank you. The next speaker that we have today is Flick Williams, and she's joining us via Zoom.
Buses and how to get more people using them in order to reduce congestion, improve air quality and meet carbon reduction targets. How we won't do that is an acceptance of constantly cancelled services, reduced early morning, evening and Sunday services, already full services that prevent people from boarding, and constantly increasing and ever more complex fare structures with no interchangeability between operators. We won't do it with a forlorn and ageing infrastructure of bus stops with inadequate seating, shelter and an absence of real-time accessible information. I don't pretend that any of this is easy, but I'm increasingly of the conclusion that it just can't be done whilst we remain beholden to the bottom line of profit-making private companies. For now, that is also something we do not have the power to change, but we must do a better job of holding bus operators to account. So let's not be under any illusions that owing to all the problems listed above, those that have an alternative, including use of private cars, will continue to exercise that choice. For those of us that don't, those already most economically disadvantaged, we lose access to work, leisure and social connectivity, like the 71-year-old lady who can now no longer get a bus home to Ashley Park when her shift ends at 7 p.m, as featured in the press. I do not believe it is remotely helpful to start presenting figures according to subsidy per passenger, because that just demonises those of us without alternatives. Is Miss Falshaw's need to get home safely from work any less valid than yours? This type of accounting just entrenches privilege. As more and more money awarded under BSIP gets redirected to propping up existing services and away from the planned improvements it was intended for, the cliff edge that this report is softening us up for gets ever closer. My strong fear is that as it becomes apparent that people cannot be persuaded to switch to bus services that simply fail to meet their travel needs, the carrot will be abandoned and the stick will be deployed with increasing force. This will come in the form of any number of different road pricing schemes that again hurt the poorest, those with least choice hardest. Mass transit systems are the only long-term solution to our transport problems. At 17, I passed my driving test. Age 26, I sold my car on becoming visually impaired almost overnight. I have a vivid memory of standing at a bus stop in East London, thinking this is my life now, as the tears of self-pity started to flow. But now I shed only angry tears for both bus and rail industries being utterly destroyed for private profit at the cost of the travelling public. I would invite all of you to join disabled and older people next Tuesday as we protest the closure of ticket offices and the assault on the rights of those requiring passenger assistance to turn up and go. Thank you.
Thank you, Flick. We really appreciate your input into the item. I'm sure Councillor Cobain will mention something about your comments. Thanks for your input. Our third speaker is Denise Craghill, and she wants to speak on item 5, the update on local bus services as well, on behalf of the Green Party. So you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Some similar points, really. 2 years ago, Boris Johnson and Grant Shapps unveiled a new £3 billion bus strategy described as the most ambitious shake-up in a generation, offering lower, simpler, flat fares, frequent services on main routes, and new flexible services elsewhere. We'll see passengers across England benefit from more frequent, more reliable, easier to use, better coordinated and cheaper bus services, encouraging more people to use the bus rather than the car as we build back better, they said. Changes would include simpler bus fares with daily price caps, more evening and weekend services, integrated ticketing across all transport modes so people can easily move from bus to train, hundreds of miles of new bus lanes making journeys quicker and more reliable, getting people out of their cars, reducing pollution and costs. All this is rather different to the report before you today, and the daily news reports of decimated local bus services around the country, even in authorities like York that secured BSIP funding to make a step change in the attractiveness of local bus travel. Of course, it is right that some of our 17 million funding has to go to provide short-term first aid, to stave off imminent cuts to morning and evening services. However, our statutory enhanced partnership in place since last November has been slow to get going on the fundamental task of restoring reliability and boosting bus usage across York. The paper in front of you refers to actions in development or to be reported shortly, when we really need them to be underway now. Sharp increases in the lowest first bus cash fares last week are trying to force everyone to pay cashless. This action hardly sets the right tone for BSIP-funded lower fares for families this summer and the autumn £1 young person fare. Where is the promotion for these trials before the end of term in our nurseries, schools and colleges? It seems commercial operators are still far from committed to the need to engage with CYC and other partners to help boost patronage rather than simply manage decline. We need the city centre bus study, the shuttle bus study, intercompany tap on and tap off, as well as the discounted fares to come forward as a whole package.
You have 30 seconds.
Oh, thank you. Right. Really as soon as possible. I'd urge Executive to do everything in its power as a partner in the bus partnership to progress the long-term future of our bus services.
Thank you.
very much.
Thanks for that input. And just so you're aware, I wrote to First Buses recently to ask them about that premium on the cash payments and tap on, tap off, etc. I haven't had a response yet, but I hope to have one soon. Thank you. Right, so those are our three public participants. Thank you for those inputs. And now we move on to the next section of the meeting. And we are on agenda item 4, which is the forward plan. So members have that in front of them. We have the all age commissioning strategy on there for September. Does anybody have any comments, updates at all? No. Okay, so can we accept that then, forward plan as it is? Thank you. Next item is the update on local bus services, and we have for this item James Gilchrist and also Michael Howard, who's going to present the report to us. So please go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I'll let Michael take you through the recommendations in the report, but in essence, the bus industry faces some real challenges. Government funding direct to bus operators was made during COVID, and that was reviewed in May this year. That review reduced the funding bus operators received directly. Through conversation with the bus operators, we believe that funding is reduced by about a third, so they're only getting 2/3 of what they received prior to May. What there is some certainty about now is how long that will run for. So that funding certainty for the bus industry will now run until the summer of 2025. Part of our BSIP bid was always for supporting bus services post-COVID. Government have since given us flexibility to use 10% of that for an extra 10% of our BSIP allocation for bus support. But again, BSIP only runs until 2025 as well. In light of that, some bus routes have been declared unviable. So as is detailed in the report, we've put in place temporary arrangements pending a full procurement process to understand what a long-term operation of those bus services would cost. But other operators are also indicating they have services under stress. So therefore, in the longer term, there might not be sufficient budget within BSIP to maintain all the services that are currently running. So what the report sets out is the challenge will pose bus operators about trying to work to that 2025 date, doing a review and making sure we get the best possible we can out of the budget available. Just touching on what some of the public speakers have said, there are projects within our BSIP programme which will address much of what was talked about, including improving bus stops, real-time information and tap on and tap off, as well as the incentives for families and young people in terms of the ticketing options. Michael, do you just want to go through the recommendation?
Yeah, no, that's fine. So there are a number of key recommendations within the report. The report picks up on a lot of the work which is going on within BSIP. And as James said, a lot of initiatives are moving forward quite quickly. We did only get the funding in late November of 2022, and we've worked through a number of those initiatives to drive forward. So some of the key things that we're bringing forward now are the development of young person fares and family fares. They're really key to getting people back onto the bus and supporting on the cost of living crisis that's going on. And they're key within the BSIP programme. Alongside that, we are working really hard to deliver on the infrastructure challenges, and a wide range of studies are progressing quite quickly in the background in order to bring those schemes forward as soon as possible. So we are working with those in line with the funding which we are getting from the DFT. So whilst we have £17.5 million from the DFT within BSIP, that is released in tranches of funding. And we're just about to receive the second tranche of funding, which will be a further 7 million, which we are looking to spend over the sort of next 18 months, alongside the original 6 million, which we received last year. The delivery of all those initiatives isn't affected by the subsidy challenges that we're getting. So within the BSIP funding, as James said, we have got an allocation for supporting services, and we are confident within the cash analysis that we've done of the funding and the development of the schemes that actually we can deliver many of the initiatives that we've identified within the BSIP programme within the funding without the subsidy affecting those. So we feel we have enough reserve within that to support all of that programme. Alongside that, officers are working with the enhanced partnership and are working with the operators to mitigate the risks and to address the challenges that the bus industry are experiencing. And we'll make sure that we are identifying where future interventions are required by looking at the network very closely as we go forward. Clearly, we've got a mix of subsidised and commercial services across the city, and we need to work within that framework in terms of where we can support things. As said in the report, we have arranged short-term tenders for a number of routes very recently, and we will be undertaking a longer-term tender process to look at whether the sort of viability of those routes and what we can do with those, and we will report back to the executive once that process is completed. And we will look at any metric which we can to help the executive make decisions around that, because clearly there are tough decisions to make, a number of cases around the funding that's available. So we will look at a range of metrics that we can bring forward to help the executive make decisions around that. The key to these measures really is to stabilise the network. We've been working really hard to do that over the last 12 months. And we continue to work with the operators to do that. The key things within the bus service improvement plan and the EP really are to increase patronage. We're having those discussions with the operators. It's in their benefit to get the patronage up, and it's in our benefit with all our sort of climate change and modal shift targets to also achieve that patronage. So one of the key objectives behind the BSIP programme and what we're recommending within here is that we are doing everything we can to get patronage up and to support the objectives on the wider council and city objectives. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael and James, very much appreciated. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Councillor Kilbane.
Thank you, Chair. Not a lot to add really, other than to thank James, Michael and other officers for the heroic work that they're doing to try and maintain the bus network in York. We are doing better than quite a lot of other local authorities, mainly in thanks to the BSIP money that's come in. Flick Williams was correct. It's not where we would like to be spending the money. We would prefer to be spending the money making improvements to the rest of the network, but right now we're just doing whatever we can to prop up the network that we've currently got, because what's really important is we maintain that network so that if it disappears, people are going to change their habits altogether. We can't maintain all aspects of it, but we need to maintain as much of it as we possibly can. So I know how difficult this is, and thanks for all that you're doing. Just a couple of things from the report to bring to exec's attention. The shuttle bus that was being planned for the city centre for access, we've put that on hold because clearly we're going to change the access arrangements to the city centre by getting Blue Badge access back in again. So we need to relook at that in the context of having Blue Badge access back to the city centre, see what if any the needs still are for that. I have tasked officers with renegotiating over the routes, especially the ones that first are threatening to close, asking if other operators are interested in those routes. I think some of the other operators are a bit more get-go and a bit more prepared to get into the fray. You know, my feeling is that first have probably had it too easy for too long in the city, and that they probably need a little bit of a shake-up too. But ultimately, what we're trying to do is make the market work, and to come back to contributions from Flick Williams. That, you know, what we're looking at here is a 40-year experiment in the privatisation of the bus network, and it has clearly failed. You know, the commercial markets have failed to provide the bus network that we all need and rely on. And the reason for that is some of the routes that we need to maintain in order to keep people connected to work, to family, to combat social isolation, they will never be commercially viable. I mean, I remember a few years back getting a bus from Ripon to York. I think it cost me £3.50 and I was the only person on the bus. Now, it was a lovely ride and I'm very glad that that service was there, but clearly that's not going to be viable, because what we need is a bus service and the market cannot provide for that. And I think the sooner that the government wakes up to that and realises that we need to provide a service and that's going to cost, the better. Now, we do have some opportunities on the horizon. The local transport plan, when it comes in, is aimed at hugely increasing sustainable travel. So that should make it easier for buses to move around the city, which should, in theory, mean that more people will be using it and there should be more money going into the system. Then, of course, there is the opportunity for bus franchising that could come along with the mayoral combined authority when the mayor arrives, which again, we'll use as much as we can to bring some certainty to the network that we've got. You know, I have to stress that the bus network is absolutely key to sustainable travel and absolutely key to meeting our climate change targets. So we will do all that we possibly can to maintain that network and to see it stabilised. So once again, thanks to the officers, and we are very determined as an administration to get on and stay on the front foot with this. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Colbain. Anybody else like to speak? Councillor Pavlovic.
It's not a speech, unfortunately. It's a genuine question that I don't know the answer. I could have asked Pete, I suppose. In paragraph 9, just the background stuff, the bus service costs approximately £70,000 a day. Does that incorporate staff wages, fuel, price of buses? And sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, sorry, I was going to say that's a realistic price per day to operate. Yeah.
And do you have an average fare per 40,000 passengers a day? I was just trying to work out what the overall profit of the bus network was when I was reading these figures.
Well, obviously, at the moment, the government are offering a lot of fare incentives. So obviously, we've got the £2 fare, and we've got the fares that obviously the operators can propose in their own right for monthly and season, season ticket type things. I don't have an average fare per day actually in York, so sorry, I can't answer that question today.
I think one of the recommendations is to start to bring that information back to you, though, as we start to make decisions going forward, so you can see on a bus route by bus route that sort of information. It's not the only matrix, as Michael's alluded to, but it will help you understand where your money is going, what it's been spent on. What we'll look at is the sort of the wider community impacts, the overlap of bus routes. All those things need looking at in the round.
Thank you. Councillor Eyre?
Thank you, Chair. I just thank officers for the work they've done on this report, and also thank the exec member who actually answered some of the questions that were missing from the report in terms of that. I mean, I had wondered whether you'd read this report prior to it going to publication, Councillor Kilbane, because paragraphs 22, 30 and 40 don't seem to make any sense and appear to be holding paragraphs. I think some of that around paragraphs 39 and 40 have been expanded a bit, but paragraph 22 again doesn't seem to make an awful lot of sense. So any clarity around what those particular paragraphs mean. On a wider point, I think, yes, as you've alluded to, again, this administration has inherited another gift from the previous administration with 17.5 million of BSIP funding, along with the £10 million of ZEB funding. It was also an alphabet soup that we get stuck in. Without this particular cliff edge, I think we would have been at a really serious situation for bus industry in this and bus patronage in this city. The fact that we were able to secure that has, as has been alluded to in this report, meant that cliff edge has been pushed nearer back to 2025, but we still do face that cliff edge. And for some people, that cliff edge has already arrived. As one of the speakers alluded to, in my particular ward and Councillor Douglas and Councillor Webb's ward, we have lost the number 11 bus service on an evening and on an evening on weekends. That was done behind closed doors. That was not done in consultation with the public. That was not done in consultation with ward members. The first any of us knew about that being withdrawn was when the decision notice was published. And that's not the way I think the administration should be engaging with residents in terms of how their bus services are operated. We have been told that this, as a ward, we will be losing car parking on the east of the city. Unnecessary car journeys will be removed. Further car parks will be closed. Roads will be closed. And now public transport is being taken away. There are very real questions for people on the east of the city about how and when they will be allowed to access the city centre. As the exec member alluded to, again, I think there is, and some of the speakers too, I think the report is slightly light on holding bus companies to account. I think how we get into some of the transparency about those figures from bus companies on what routes. Clearly, some routes are not profitable, but some routes are incredibly profitable. And that's one of the issues around the privatisation of buses. And the more information we can get around that to see where the profit is being made, when we're constantly just told about where the losses are. And I think the last bit I had in terms of my comments was the report again seems light of what those solutions are in 2025. And I had made a note, Councillor Kilbane, about your comments in October that franchising isn't a silver bullet, but I think it's something we must grasp. And so I was glad to hear you talk about that, because nothing in the report seemed to grasp the idea of franchising. So we would be keen to hear what your thoughts are on franchising in the interim period.
Thank you, Councillor Eyre. James, would you like to speak?
Yeah, just on the paragraphs. So on paragraph 22, there are some typos. So we have got break clauses if the BSIP funding is not secure in the future. So that should just have the word "we" in there. And on paragraph, maybe it's my English, but on paragraph 39, I think it's fairly clear. In paragraph 40, again, it's just missing the word "will." So this report will be considered and possibly developed further in light of any decisions to review hostile vehicle mitigation measures.
Thank you, James. Would anybody else like to?
Just on 39, is that a bit about steer consultancy?
Sorry?
As well? It was that same paragraph. There was the sentence about steer consultancy. Doesn't.
So they are the consultancy that were commissioned to develop so steer is the name of the company that were commissioned to undertake the feasibility under the last administration in terms of what a city centre bus shuttle would look like. That report is imminent and almost ready, but what we've asked them to do is to pause it and review it when we've made decisions about HVM.
So is that to undertake and to explore?
Yeah, so what we said is we want them to update the report once we can tell them what the solution for HVM is.
Thank you.
Blue badge, I should say, not HVM.
Councillor Webb?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor, should have been an English teacher. Get your red pen and you can start checking everyone's grammar. I think it's worth just mentioning, you did mention the number 12 that I think runs through Heworth. Well, sorry, the number 11 that runs through Heworth out. We did have a similar situation just prior to the election with the number 12. Again, the first we heard about it was when it was being axed, basically. And we had to pull together, didn't we? And we pulled together across the city. I know we in Heworth did that. We worked with members in Dringhouses, Woodthorpe, Westfield. We worked to save that service, and I'm glad that we did. But as we've been all agreed tonight, we're in a real dire strait and we need to do something about it. And my main point was really going to be about one of the council notes points, the first council notes in the recommendations, regarding young person and family incentives. I think it would be remiss of me not to mention how important that is and how important it is to build a good culture of bus use amongst families and young people in this city, and how that's going to have such a positive impact on what we can do going forwards, because we really do need to continue to do everything we can to improve bus use. For all of the reasons we've talked about, to combat loneliness and isolation, to combat the climate crisis. These are all real positives, and I just wanted to take this opportunity to highlight that part of the report as Exec Member for Children and Young People, because we should be doing everything we can now and over the summer and beyond to really incentivise bus use, because it's one of those things at the moment where, in the terrible situation we're in due to the government, we need to make a change. We need to do what we can at our end. So thanks for all your work on this, and please let's talk as much as we can about what incentives we have to get people back on buses. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Webb. Right, anybody else like to speak? Okay, thank you, everybody. So the recommendations are on page 12 and 13 of your agenda pack. Can I see those in favour of accepting the recommendations then, please? Thank you, that's unanimous. Right, our next agenda item is the LEVI pilot funding for Askham Bar HyperHub. And on this item, we have James and Christian who are going to speak for us. Thank you. Off you go.
It's not a report on jeans, sadly. So Christian will take you through the report, but in essence, Christian and his team have secured a grant offer for the next HyperHub at Askham Bar. HyperHubs are an important part of our strategic charging estate, of which HyperHubs are just a part of the estate. There's a much wider range of charging facilities available. However, this project does have some legal challenges in terms of delivery. So we're proposing a phased approach to draw down the funding, which will also allow us
public EV charging strategy that lays out how we support residents and visitors to charge their electric vehicles in the city. It lays out a three-tier approach to provision, understanding that different people have different needs. So we have three main solutions. This report relates to HyperHubs. In brief, HyperHubs are basically analogous to a traditional petrol station. If you were to fuel your traditional car, you generally do it on the way to something else. So HyperHubs, the strategy lays out the intention to have them in strategic locations around the ring road and other locations so that you can do just that, charge your vehicle on the way to somewhere else. We have already completed 2 HyperHubs, one at Monk's Cross, one at Poppleton Bar. So far, they've been very successful. And in terms of actual energy produced into vehicles, it accounts for 90% of our entire charging estate. That's the HyperHubs. We have one more underway at Union Terrace, going through the planning process. And this decision relates to the 4th proposed HyperHub, which we hope will be at Askham Bar. So that would be at the south of the city, just therefore completing a ring. We have secured some external funding support to pursue this 4th HyperHub from LEVI. They have offered us approximately £1.2 million, and they would require match funding of approximately £700,000 from ourselves. This particular HyperHub would be especially challenging because of the legal issues that are present. So we are proposing to undertake an initial bit of feasibility work to get a bit more certainty on those legal issues. But fundamentally, the decision before you today is to accept. Option 1 is to accept the funding offer from LEVI and in principle agree to match fund it. However, at this stage, agree to commit £60,000 of funding towards doing that feasibility work. If it turns out that the scheme is not feasible and we can't overcome those funding issues, then we will stop the project at that point. Option 2 is to not take this approach, do not accept the LEVI funding and go back to the drawing table on this one. The recommendation is option 1, to accept the funding and do the initial piece of feasibility work. Do you have any questions?
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Christian and James? Councillor Coulbain?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'll just be brief again. Thanks for all the work that you've done on this project, and congratulations on securing over £1 million worth of funding to make this happen. And if you can also pass on thanks to Andrew, who's done quite a lot of work on this project too, and explaining the strategy to me when we first came into office. And it was, I think it's important that the public have a broader view of the strategy, because I wasn't quite getting it when we were in opposition, in terms of how we're trying to make sure that everybody can charge their car at a place that's most suitable for them, at a time that's most suitable for them overall. So this is just one part of that overall 3-tier strategy for the city. Geographically, obviously, it's quite important, sitting where it does to the south of the city. And of course, it's right on the edge of the city boundaries. So this is obviously something that will also benefit the combined authority when that comes in. And I think we need to look at this project within that optic, really, as we head towards the mayoral combined authority, because it will be a key strategic charging point, not just for York, but for people passing close to York. I'm really excited that this is all staying within council control, and I think that's really innovative of us. Fully applaud that, and also think very wise to take a cautious approach, given some of the possible constraints around the land, etc. So one step at a time, but well done on getting it this far. And I'm happy to recommend recommendation option 1.
Thank you, Councillor Coulbain. Councillor Avilius? Microphone, Councillor. Thank you.
Just wanted to ask a little bit about where the electricity comes from. I see that at point 18, you talk about the national grid, the impact on the national grid. And just, can you tell us a little bit about how much capability we have to make sure that it's renewable electricity, and how much that's within our control in City of York?
So the HyperHubs that we've completed to date have solar and battery storage facilities within them. Beyond simply using the solar energy to charge the vehicles, it also allows us to smooth out the draw on the grid, which is a large concern as well. The graphic that you refer to at point 19 basically illustrates that, and the HyperHub we're proposing at Askham Bar would have the same provision as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Eyre?
Thank you, Chair. And it was good to hear the exec member praising the work of his predecessors in terms of the strategy and the work that's gone into securing the funding and building the current hubs. Obviously, it won't surprise you to find that we'll be supporting the recommendation. We do support the recommendations that are put forward. I think there are a few key questions that I would ask around that. I think one thing I thought was missing from the paper, given previous issues, not just on the HyperHubs, but on a lot of other capital schemes, there was no mention of any conversations with Northern Power Grid, who are absolutely critical to delivery of schemes like this and not always the easiest to work with in terms of particular timeframes. I think, as Councillor Kilbane mentioned, paragraph 11, that actually lobbied to take taxpayers' funding rather than the private sector to enable them to keep those sites, as the others are, under our control. I think now that we're at 18 months of operation, I think we could be more transparent about what the business case for that is, what our income and expenditure costs are, whether that is actually making sure that we're breaking even, and also whether that break even does in fact include capital costs as well as revenue costs. Park and ride sites, as we're choosing them, as far as I'm aware, a lot of those are locked overnight. So is there something we need to look at in terms of making sure those are accessible to people after hours, when a lot of people who've been at work may want to be using those after hours and charging during that particular period and won't be able to? And then one that James will know I've spoken to at length during my days running around the city, around the Monk's Cross one. Prior to the council facilities being up and operational, CYC staff have been using the HyperHubs around sensibly to charge the vehicles we have. Have we done any modelling to see those usage figures? How much of that includes actually CYC staff charging their vehicles? How much of that is commercial operators using that to get cheaper electricity to run commercial operations? And how much of that actually is residential?
Thank you, Councillor. Christian, do you want to respond to anything?
I think I noted down each of those points and I shall try to address each of them. Your first point related to NPG and the difficulty in implementing these schemes when having to work with various different partners with whom we don't necessarily have a great number of levers to force them to do what we need them to do. I accept that point. It's a challenge we'll continue to face, not just on this scheme, but almost all schemes that involve NPG. Break-even costs and the principle of covering our costs. So yeah, that's laid out in the strategy. Because we control the network, we set the tariff and we can make a decision on where we set that tariff to cover our costs. Because the funding, the capital funding has generally come from external sources to date, I don't believe we are intending to cover those costs from the income. We're only setting the tariff to cover our ongoing operational and maintenance costs, is the answer to that one. The third question was park and rides and 24/7 access. I'll have to take that one away, but I do believe the intention is that these sites are to be available 24/7.
I'm pretty sure they are, but I will need to double check as well.
And the final point was about the range of users currently using the HyperHubs. You noted that CYC vehicles are using them, commercial vehicles such as delivery companies are a common user. So what percentage of residents and visitors make up the numbers? I don't have those numbers to hand. I don't know if we have them available separately, and I shall look into that.
Thank you, Christian. Would anybody else like to speak? No. Okay, and I just wanted to add that the challenges around Northern Power Grid are well known and documented, and I've actually in the last few weeks been speaking to partners across the region to see what we can do about starting to get that fixed, because there's a number of projects that we want to implement that will rely upon those connections. And I think we're in a fairly fortunate position that York and North Yorkshire Local Enterprise Partnership has quite a strong connection to Northern Power Grid and is lobbying quite heavily there. So it's being looked into at the moment from using our connections, our networking, to see what we can do to bring those connections forward sooner. It's absolutely critical. It is for nationally, you know, there's so much work that needs to be done on that, isn't there? Right, everybody. So are we happy to move to the recommendations? Then they're on page 35 and 36. And I, as Councillor Kilbane, recommended option 1. Can I see those in favour of option 1? Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Right, our next item is item can I count now as the next question? 7, anti-racism and inclusion strategy and action plan. And we have Pauline Stutchfield, who is going to speak on this. Gary, are you going to come to the table for this item as well? Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I'm not very well prepared. I've had an eye operation which has gone very badly.
Oh dear.
We'll make a start, and then if Addy joins us, then she can.
Yes,
join
absolutely.
in.
Please go ahead, Pauline.
That's lovely, thank you. Thank you, Chair. This report presents the citywide strategy and action plan from the independent and cross-sectional working group led by Inclusive Equal Rights UK 3.0, in line with a full council resolution approved on 21st of October 2021, to aspire to make York an anti-racist and inclusive city. Gary and hopefully Hadi shortly will be here on behalf of IER UK to talk through the work in the strategy, and Gary's particular focus is on the statistics and information. Yes.
Thank you for allowing me.
Pauline, could you turn on Gary's mic for him, please? Thank you.
I'll also follow on from Gary if that's okay.
And Gary, could you introduce yourself as well, please?
Sorry,
Thank you.
my name's Gary Craig. I'm a resident of York. I live in Clifton, and I'm a member of the working group, and my responsibility was mainly, not solely, but mainly for accumulating the data. As members will know, the report was published last Thursday. It has generated, shall we say, a lively debate, reaching as far as Nigel Farage, who rubbished it. So in my view, if that's the case, we must have been doing something right. It also produced a minor torrent of very hostile and quite, in some cases, disgusting comment. And I suppose the observation there is to say that if anybody believed that racism was not still alive and well in York, then they should read the comments that have been made by some members of the public to the report. I just want to focus on 2 things, though, in relation to the data, and hopefully Hadi will be able to elaborate on some other points. There have been 2 areas of criticism of the data. One has been about the source of the data. The data came from 3 places, not all in combination, where it wasn't necessary, but they came from freedom of information requests. And for those who are not familiar, public bodies are legally required to provide data on request, unless there are specific reasons why that data could not be provided. For example, like the census, that it might enable people to identify individuals, or in case of national security and so on. So most public bodies that we approached provided freedom of information data. The second source would be indirect sources, by which I refer to things like annual reports. And the third source would be direct communications with members of staff of the organisations concerned. Now, in the case of, for example, the York and Scarborough Hospitals Trust, we had data from all 3 sources. We had their FOI, Freedom of Information data. We had their annual report, the most recent of which was published a month ago. And we had a meeting with the head of diversity, and put all those together, iron out any discrepancies, and you get the data that's reproduced in the report. The police, amongst others, have challenged the data that is in the report about the police. The data about the police came from freedom of information requests, which I made, And the first of those was on the 20th of February, and was responded to shortly afterwards. We also had information from the Police and Crime Commissioner. We also met a unit at Fulford Police Station called the Race Action Group, which provided further data. And in that case, there was a slight discrepancy between what they were telling us, essentially about the number of Black and minority ethnic staff and the Freedom of Information data. Whatever the police like to say, the data is their data. They may not like it, I'm sure they don't, because it shows that the chance, for example, of a Black person being stopped and searched by the police in the North Yorkshire Police Force area is significantly higher. And I'm talking about tens, not just one or two, tens, a factor of tens greater than the possibility of being stopped and searched by the police if you're white. As I say, they may not like the data, but it's their data. And if they want to disown it, then they obviously need to go back to the Registrar General and put something different in. So it's a question of the source of the data. That's where it came from 3 different places. And in some cases, incidentally, we did have meetings with representatives of race equality groups. We had one here in the City Council's offices. We had one with Askham Bryan staff, for example, with staff from the University of York, and so on and so forth. The other question that has been raised, particularly by the Daily Mail, is that we have manipulated the census data in order to suit our own purposes. Now, we actually had no purposes at the beginning of this report other than to illuminate the extent, if any, of racism within the city. But in doing so, it was obviously important to distinguish between different ethnic groups. We decided to differentiate between the category of white British, by which you would mean 2 white parents with British citizenship, and everybody else. Everybody else includes various categories like Gypsy Roma traveller, like white other. And the Daily Mail reporter insisted that groups like white other should be classed together with white British and that they were not minorities. Well, I just want to remind members that the basis of most racism is generally skin color or culture. People complaining about noisy music, people complaining about strange dress, strange cultural habits, and so on and so forth. It doesn't need me to remind you, for example, that the white other category would include, for example, many East European migrant workers who came to work in this country after 2004, many of whom were subject to serious racism, both here and in North Yorkshire, on the basis of their ethnic origin and the Farage-led call to go back to your own country. So that's why we distinguish between white British and everybody else. Now, everybody else, of course, includes a very wide range of people, mixed heritage, African, Jamaican. Hadi herself is from the Gambia. I don't know if she's a British citizen, actually. But the Daily Mail would not let this alone and just kept pursuing it. Now, I've said to the Daily Mail that he either ought to go back and do a basic social science course, and I've been teaching social science for 30 years at professorial level, or he should cease his lies, because he is actually lying. We made a very clear distinction, and it's in the report, as to the way we were defining minorities. And I hope that's clearly understood. I think it appears in the report probably 3 times. Now, I mentioned these 2 things about the source of the data and about the division between ethnic groups in the census. And this division, incidentally, has been checked with the census, it's been checked with 2 or 3 other academics, and it's been checked by various other people with no particular axe to grind. What I concluded was that the non-white British population in York was 13.7%, and I rounded it up to 14%, partly as a matter of convenience, but partly, and I'll give you 2 examples, that there has been serious undercounting, and this has been one of the problems that has bedeviled the census for many, many years. It's not, as it were, the fault of the counters. It's a question of people not trusting the census and how it might be used. Obviously, people who are scared of being surveilled, of being the objects of racist surveillance, are very reluctant to fill in the census. So just to finish off, these 2 examples I want to give. One is of the Gypsy Roma traveller population. The 2023 census says that there are approximately 300 people of Gypsy Roma traveller ethnic origin in the city. There are not. If you talk to the staff of the Travellers Trust, the counts they have done suggest that the population of Gypsy Roma travellers is significantly more than 1,000. Now, people in the Gypsy Roma traveller population often do not nominate themselves as Gypsy Roma traveller. For example, parents are afraid that if their children are known to be Gypsy Roma traveller, they're going to be discriminated against or bullied at school. So that's one example of undercounting. The other is a more ephemeral, but I think substantial question. I talked to the Bangladeshi leaders some years ago in the city. And I said, again, the census, and this, I was then talking about the 2011 census, put them down as about 300 Bangladeshis in the city. And the leader I spoke to laughed and he said, look, last week we went to a funeral in Newcastle for one of our most respected leaders. He said, we took 300 people in buses from York to Newcastle. Our population is significantly bigger than the 300 recorded in the census. So that's why I rounded up from 13.7 to 14%. I mean, it could be larger. But this surprised a lot of people because very often the figure that's quoted for white is a catch-all figure, including, as I say, white, other, and all the rest of it, which is about 7 or 8%. Actually, it's 14%, and that constitutes about 30,000 people in the city. And our report is basically arguing that they need a better deal. Thank you very much. Oh,
Thank you.
I've just talked about the data, so if you want to do your introduction.
Thank you, Gary. Haddy, would you like to speak?
Yes, first of all,
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes,
please.
Can I introduce myself and apologise for being very late. I'm Hadi Nijai and I chair Inclusive Equal Rights UK. We were very grateful in October 2021 when the motion of making York an anti-racist and inclusive city was approved by all councillors. We're grateful for everyone, but we had a very important mandate, which is this, we've all seen the last week, which is to develop the long-term anti-racism and inclusion strategy for the city of York. I'm not sure what, Gary, the data, but what you have seen in the strategy is evidence-based, data-led strategy with some people who have experienced some structural barriers in the city of York, their experiences in different sectors, which was conducted by St. John University, the School of the Institute of Social Justice. So I just want to say that this is a very important document. It's anti-racism and inclusion. We are not, what we are trying to do is ask for equality. I know it cannot be perfect, but what we want to do is for people of color and people from ethnic minorities to have a much more better and equal opportunities, equal treatment, and to be treated equally with dignity. That's what this report is about. It's a 5-year because we believe that it shouldn't take us very long to achieve and implement these actions so we can have some sort of equality. But I will stop there. I guess there's one thing I really want to address, which is anti-racism doesn't mean we are anti-white. This is not, we are against the white. Well, I am British, so I just don't, there's a lot I need to say, but I don't know, I don't have the time nor the energy, and I think it would just distract the very important session today. So just want to say anti-racism and inclusion doesn't mean anti-white. It means we want just simple equality and to be treated fairly. That's what we're about, and that's what we try to do. And I've worked with most of you, I've spoken with most of you. I fundamentally work with integrity, and my integrity was challenged, and I am furious about that. I am, and my team who have spent their entire almost 2 years sacrifice their time and their family to do this work, and to receive what is just violent and unfair and criminal. I think we should all challenge it. So I will stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Hadi. Pauline, would you like to say anything further?
Thank you, Chair. I think my introduction has been well covered by Hadi, not least to say that the Council welcomes IER UK's work and the report to help the Council and our partners understand how people of colour and ethnic minority groups experience life in the city. And we are very grateful for their continued work in this field. We have been recognised, and we are recognised as a city of sanctuary and human rights city. And the work we do every day demonstrates that with our partners, and has been recognised by the group as well. It's not a judgment on all of that work that we're doing, but we can improve, and the evidence suggests that we can improve. And we sincerely thank all of those that have been involved in the work. Paragraph 8 just demonstrates to you the work that we've been doing alongside the group, and we've had constant discussions since the motion, and been working together for the last 15 months. There are another number of recommendations of paragraph 4 for you to receive the strategy and the action plan. Agree the council response to the strategy, including a clear commitment in the new council plan to deliver a response within 3 months. There are a number of recommendations and actions that the council, including all of our services and our mechanisms around recruitment and retention, around education, social care and housing, that we will be looking at in detail, alongside the 3 recommendations in the equalities impact assessment at the end of the report. If I can just point you to paragraph 27, and at the bottom, human rights and equalities. The outcome of the equalities impact assessment, that we should ensure that we cover ongoing engagement with those with lived experience of racism to develop joint solutions going forward. We have specific guidance on how to handle and respond to racism in all of our council policies, and a mechanism for all institutions and partners in the city to take joint action in reducing racism and promoting active inclusion. We also recommend that the council receive the strategy and action plan on behalf of the city, and that's next week on the 20th of July, to show rapid commitment. And we also recommend that, Chair, that you sign the pledge at Annex B on behalf of the council. And we will look at building those commitments that are in the pledge into our action plan as well. So there are 3 sets of actions for us to look at, which we will build into our action plan. So members are asked to support those recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your input there. Councillor Lomas.
Thank you, and thank you all for the work that you've done in IER UK to bring forward this important piece of work. I've got a few points to make, but I'd like to start by just amplifying and sharing Hattie's fury at some of the responses to the release of this important report. It's absolutely appalling and despicable that some people have chosen to use this opportunity to lie, as Gary pointed out, to misrepresent fact, and to continue to spread hate, which has no place in our city. When we originally brought this motion to council, we very, very specifically talked about anti-racism, because it is not good enough just to avoid being racist or to avoid discriminating against people. We must all work together to tackle racism wherever we find it, wherever we come across it or discover it. The abuse that Hattie and colleagues have received in recent days, I think just absolutely proves and evidences the need for this report, and shows us exactly how crucial it is. And I want to say on behalf of people across the city that we should not be afraid of the findings in this report. Yes, we should be saddened. Yes, we should be angry about it, but we shouldn't be afraid of someone helping us to uncover the scale of the problem that is being faced by people in our city, to help us to begin the work to address the problem. We should be proud to step forward and take part in this work that we all now need to do across the city. Many have sought to dismiss this report by suggesting there's no issue. There's no problem because they haven't seen it. But I say that is the problem. The problem is that lots of people haven't seen the scale of the problem in the city. And if there is no issue, and I was asked this when doing an interview earlier on the topic, if there is no issue, then why don't we have better representation of people from all cultures in our public life? Well, if you face racism on a daily basis, how confident would you feel to step forward into public life in our city? And I am ashamed of the fact that we don't have better representation in public life. And I am grateful to IER UK for helping us to start the journey to making that different. I also want to reflect on something I think is missing from the report, because I think my portfolio title missed the human rights element, which we added to the portfolio. And the reason why I'm highlighting that is because I think that human rights is something that we have been very proud of in the city. But there are lots of events in recent years, including the findings of this report, including the failure to engage with the Human Rights and Equalities Board in recent months, that have really put a bit of a tarnish on our shine around human rights. And by coincidence, today I met with the Human Rights City Network executive to start the work of rebuilding the Human Rights and Equalities Board, where we will be able to take a genuine cross-city look at human rights and equalities issues, and we will be able to lead our communities towards a better relationship with human rights and equalities. And I hope that that will form part of the work that we will all do together to genuinely become an anti-racist city.
Thank you, Councillor Lomas. Would anybody else like to speak at this point? Councillor Webb?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Hattie and Gary, for presenting this evening. It can't always be easy, to be honest, and solidarity with the people who've contributed and wrote the report and, quite frankly, dealt with racism as a result in the last few days. It's not right, and we should all be, keen to talk about the fact that this is not right, and that we, as Councillor Lomas has said, need to be anti-racist, not just against racism. So I think that the thing I want to focus on is to do with the data you've captured around schools. And I think firstly, you've highlighted the need to improve data capture in schools. And I think that is really, really valuable to point out. But the facts really have been laid bare. And I was saddened by the points about the disproportionate number of fixed term exclusions from Roma, Gypsy and traveller backgrounds, from children from those backgrounds. And I think we have to acknowledge this. And that's, I think, one of the main features throughout this report is we have to take stock, we have to stop, we have to acknowledge that there is an issue, and it's laid out factually within this report. And I think that on schools, I really do think this is an opportunity for us as a city to think, right, okay, we need to be confident enough to develop an open and inclusive and an adaptive education system that delivers a broad and balanced curriculum, right? And I think that for me, and I know from our schools, they will be keen to produce an inclusive city curriculum about York's social conscience. I think this is something that York really does have and should be proud of. But as Kate Lomas has said, it has been tarnished slightly. And I think this is a great opportunity for us to really take stock and do something about the problem. So thank you for everything you've done and you continue to do. And yeah, let's do everything we can to make York an anti-racist city. Thank you very much.
Councillor Coles, did you want to speak?
Yes, just very briefly. I wasn't an elected member when this work was started, but I did want to thank those and everybody who voted for it at the time, and to everybody who has done all this work in the IER and the UK and the council to bring this report forward. I am very proud to be supporting it today, and going forwards, will do my best to be part of the process of implementing it.
Thank you, Councillor Coles. Councillor Kilbane?
Thanks, Chair. And I was just checking in my diary, Hattie, and it is 2.5 years since we first met in Roundtree's Park, where you told me of the casual and vile racism that you experienced and others experienced on an almost daily basis. And I remember at the time, I don't know if you remember it, I remember at the time saying, we've had enough of this, I'll use the word crap, to be polite, and we need to do something about it. And we talked about how, we've been protesting this kind of stuff all of our lives, really, and the changes weren't happening quick enough because they were structural. And that's it, that's rooted in the institutions of the country, and we need to be bold, and we need to address that. And actually, that's exactly what your piece of work has done with IER UK. And I just want to say thank you to you, to Gary, to Pauline and the council, and to everybody involved in producing this. And I guess, without wanting to give an example that might be a bit too close for home, I think the work that you've done to get to this point was the pregnancy. Now the baby's born, and the really hard work is going to begin of making sure that we see through this strategy into every institution in this city where it needs to be, starting with the council. Just look around this table here tonight if you want to see representation in the city of York, and this is not a source of pride for us. However, what you have produced and what you've put on the agenda is a proud moment for this city. We will not be distracted by the bullies and the rate, and total solidarity with you and all IAR UK in standing up against the vile treatment that you've suffered. We won't be cowed by the bullies. We will tackle this issue, and thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kilbane. Councillor Eyre?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, obviously welcome the report, the recommendations, and huge thanks to everybody that's been involved in that, including the ones you mentioned that aren't here tonight. I think the first point I'd made on here is the point that Councillor Lomas made, that the reaction to this report is actually evidence of the need for the report in the first place. It just has been an absolute justification of the work that's gone in. I didn't actually know Gary was involved in the report when I started making the comments I made, and I first was involved with Gary over a decade ago when we were looking at BME access to mental health services. And that's why I was particularly disappointed to see the response from Askham Wear Valley, because while this particular bit does focus on staffing issues around mental health, we do know that, for example, inpatient rates for people from BME background are significantly higher than those from white British communities. Those conversations that you had around the classification of white, non-white, non-white British, I was having those conversations with the NHS 11, 12 years ago in terms of how they were clarifying, and the high rates of people who didn't identify. Even 5 years ago at an ICB level in West Yorkshire, the NHS still weren't coding people as white or white British, and actually challenged them and asked the question. And they were shocked to think that they didn't actually know the number of non-white British staff that they had in terms of how they were doing their workforce planning. So we've come very, very little distance, I think, in 10 years. So this really is important that this comes up at this time. A lot of the work that I did with Gary at that time was around hate crimes, actually, and it's an area that I've been very passionate about for quite a while. It's a very complicated issue. I think those conversations we had at the time, increasing hate crime numbers, as perverse as it seems, isn't always necessarily a bad thing. I think you made the comment, Councillor Lomas, that people haven't seen racism. I think often they have seen it, they just haven't acted and haven't done anything about it. And I think people don't always have the confidence. So in many cases, making sure that all the hate crimes that are happening, we'll never get to all, but actually making sure hate crimes are reported periodically will lead to that spike in hate crime reporting. But it means that people have the confidence to actually act and deal with things. That happened to me 8 months ago when I was unfortunate enough to see somebody being racially abused in the car park at Lidl. Literally just going in to buy his wife some flowers for, she was coming home from work, was stopped, racially abused in the car park. 7 or 8 people walked past. Not very many people stopped to act, not many people stopped to did. I did a stop, spoke to him, helped him, made sure that his car wasn't damaged, etc., etc. But I actually took the time at that point to report that to the police and made sure that incident was recorded, because we as a city and we as a nation need to know when those things are happening and make sure that everybody has the confidence. And I know the report does mention about hate crime reporting centres. A lot of work has gone on third-party hate crime reporting centres, because it really is important for those people who are in denial about some of the issues we're facing, that all those issues are recorded and we can actually say to people that is the actual level of hate crime in the city. It will never be, we'll never get 100% reporting, but if we're only at 10% reporting, that really is not getting those issues across, and it makes it easier for people who don't want to act on these issues to do pushback, as we've seen nationally, and say it's not an issue rather than actually facing up to it. I think it's hard in a report like this, but one of the things I did want to highlight was the issues around the comments around York Hospital Trust and the sort of the one little ray of sunlight in many ways around that, with 20% of staff, 34% of clinical staff and 31% of senior staff. That really does, if you can draw any kind of positive out of that, show what a hugely important role these people play in our NHS, BME community plays in our NHS service and all of our services. And actually that valuable contribution is often missed when people have those dialogues. Certain individual whose name I won't mention, who you mentioned, Gary, earlier on, like to gloss over those hugely positive contributions that the BME community makes. And that is the one thing from that report, and in a sea of things and issues we have to deal with, that's one I really wanted to highlight and thank those ones. And I think the key thing that this report does bring out is the challenge that we have is how we take this forward in partnership. At that same time, 11, 12 years ago, we had the same difficulties with the police and how the police wanted to deal with it, the same issues with health. And for us to deal with this, we all do need to work as a partnership. And obviously through the ICB, the ICP, we're hopefully bringing together as organisations in the public sector even better and actually making that part of that key ethos driving forward, that we all deal with this together.
Thank you, Councillor Eyre. Councillor Pavlovic, did you want to speak?
Thank you. And just to echo the points that everybody's made, thank you for the work you've done. But I think fundamentally, what this report and this strategy says is hopefully now people, and I think Councillor made the point about underreporting and people being frightened to make their case known, or to say, yes, I am a victim of racial abuse, or I am having problems with the housing department, and or my neighbours, and it's of a racist element. And what I wanted to say is, you know, this report can't just sit on a shelf. It can't just be something that we say, well, we signed up to this, you know, virtue signalling. It's got to then be carried through, and we need to be able to monitor what we're doing, how are we making changes? Is the situation improving? And if it's not, why isn't it? Because we're not working hard enough. And within the areas and the portfolio areas that I cover, you know, I want you to come in, I want you to work with us. And I want to be able to show you that, yes, we have taken this seriously and, more importantly, applied it. So yes, I commend wholeheartedly the report and the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Revillius.
Yeah, like Councillor Coles, I wasn't part of the council when this report was commissioned, but I am incredibly grateful that for all the work that all of you have done to make this report, and I have learned a lot from reading it, and I fully intend to use that learning and put it into action in my daily life and in my councillor duties. And I really thank you, and I'm proud to be supporting it today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And would anybody else like to speak? I think that's everybody, isn't it? So I would just like to echo the thanks. I think this is hugely important for our city. It's important that we look at ourselves and society that we live in, and we're honest about it. And it's really important, every aspect of what we do. And one of the recommendations is that I will sign the pledge on behalf of the council. And I couldn't be more eager to do that and get on with the work of supporting the recommendations in the report and making sure that the actions that we can take in the council are carried out, as Pauline has outlined already. So please rest assured that we will do everything we can to make sure that representation within our workforce, the experience that people from minority groups have when they come into contact with the council, and their lives within our city are improved over the coming time. So I look forward to working with you, and thanks for everything that you've done and endured. Thank you.
Yeah, make two very quick observations.
Very quick.
Yeah, well, one is simply to acknowledge the support and help we've had from council officers. They've been extremely facilitative. I mean, they could have hidden behind a freedom of information request, but actually they've been very positive in providing us with all the data that we thought we needed. Now, we certainly need more, but we'll come back to that later on. But I just want to acknowledge their support. The other thing I want to say very quickly, the point that the councillor made about York's social conscience, this is not going to be easy in some areas. There is a view of Joseph Rowntree, for example, as this benign old gentleman who provided all kinds of bequests to the city, parks, theatres, streets named after him, and all the rest of it. The Joseph Rowntree Trusts have finally, after 150 years, acknowledged that his profits were made on the back of slaves from West Africa. So let's remember that all these buildings were built on the backs of African slaves over the last 200 years. Now, when we come to think about, for example, a curriculum which is York-based in the schools, I think something around, for example, Wilberforce, who was the MP here, Rowntree, perhaps John Carr, who was a prominent town clerk and architect, but actually designed and built Harewood House, which was built on the profits of sugar from the West Indies. I think, you know, it's complex and it's challenging, but it's worth doing, and it would be rooted very much in York's own experience. But, you know, there will be people who complain.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. So the recommendations for us are on page 88. Can I see everybody in favour of the recommendations, please? Thank you. So that's unanimous, and thank you for everything you've done and being with us today. Right, so moving on then. We have covered all of the regular business. I've not been made aware of any urgent business, and so I bring the meeting to a close. Thank you.